Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. I have a new book to review. I've been reading it for the past couple weeks along with a few other books, perplexing my mind, trying to find out what the heck is going on our planet. A couple of the other books I've been looking at to kind of give you some idea of what we're going to talk about. Mithras, a older religion, maybe older than Christianity, a competitor for Christianity, a religious god for the Romans of the past, the Iranians, the Indians from India. I've been reading this. I'm trying to understand what's going on with the secret societies. What is their religion? Why are they trying to destroy Christianity? Amazing. Another one I just got in the mail I've been reading, I've been talking about. Voices from the Cosmos. Talks about channelers, psychics, people who can use telepathy or leave their bodies, astral travel, and talking to all kinds of aliens. So what do we got going on here? We got Mithras, this ancient religion, mysteries and initiation rediscovered. A lot of the secret societies, Rosicrucians, Illuminati, all get initiated. I've been talking a lot about that in my videos. I'm going to talk about it more. I'm going to continue investigating and reading. What about channelers? Talking with gray alien, reptilians, and other beings. This ought to be a fantastic video about this book, as well as this book, from what I've been reading. But today's book, Blueprints of the Gods. Amazing material. This author, Howard West, in his book discusses the origin of the human race. Blueprints of the Gods, the human bloodline of the Anunnaki aliens. So we hear about the Anunnaki aliens. We hear about Nibiru, some planet that's coming towards our Earth. Another solar system interacting with our solar system. And apparently it has some beings on it called the Anunnaki. Are they some kind of reptilian beings? What do they have to do with gray aliens? And what do they have to do with creating humans? Maybe mixing their DNA with Neanderthals or something. It's been interesting. I read the entire book. Just flip it open here. You can see my highlighted. Page 111. All my highlights. So no question, I've been reading it all. Read it to the very end. And I pondered what I would read from this book to give you a sample and to try to have a conversation about what the heck is going on planet Earth with the crazy Armageddon catastrophe, world-ending, World War III, nuclear war, economic attack, terrorism, destroying Christianity, all kinds of craziness. So maybe this video will add a little bit more information to my mind, and if you're watching this video, to your mind, and maybe we can work together to find out what the heck is going on. So I decided to go to this chapter 3, History and His Story. There's a saying here by Winston Churchill, "History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it." So the winners of wars gets to write history. It looks like they're trying to rewrite history right now. For thousands of years, 2,000 years, there's been a lot of chaos and anarchy promoting the Christian religion after Jesus was born and crucified. And before that, the Hebrews were causing lots of disturbances and problems. What is the truth? So that's what this video is going to be about. What is it with the Hebrews? What do they talk about where we humans came from? So chapter 3, recorded history, history and his story. And I realize that my videos seem like they're homegrown. They are. Some people complain and the quality or professionalism or the pronunciation of some words. And I'm thinking, that should be the least of our problems. We've got some issues going on in the world, and there are some forces apparently controlling the weather, chemtrailing, sky spraying of chemicals, microwave HARP transmitters, 5G network coming online, more microwave transmissions, all kinds of terror events, satanic rituals, statues, images portrayed on the Empire State Building, the Hoover Dam. What's going on? What is this new religion? What is who was Mithras? What are all these channelers saying? What are all these aliens saying to Angela Smith and Scott Jones, PhDs, doctors? What's the truth? Isn't that what we're all after? So I'm just going to start reading from page 46 and throw in my 2 cents as I read on. And again, it's a conversation, what I'm trying to have. And I do enjoy people making comments and contributing intelligent information so we can continue the conversation and all maybe learn something. Origin of the sacred bloodline. The ancient Sumerians, that would be over there in the Iraq area, the Middle East, the Sumerians, Egypt with the pyramids, Iraq with the 2 rivers, Babylon, adjacent to Palestine, Jerusalem, Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, and so much more. Seemingly the center part or center focus of what's going on in the world today. Apparently the reason for World War I and World War II and 9/11 and so much more. The ancient Sumerian religions surrounding this alien group called the Anunnaki, they observed the Anunnaki as sky gods and believed their ancestors were created hundreds of thousands of years earlier by this same caste of aliens from the stars. So these Sumerians in these tablets and ancient scrolls and the hieroglyphics on the pyramids, do they describe their ancestors as creating humans hundreds of thousands of years earlier by the same caste of aliens from the stars? Or is somebody rewriting history? Thus, the ancient Sumerians believed themselves to be part human and part Anunnaki. And we hear a lot about reptilians and shapeshifters. Do we have a bloodline of creatures like that on Earth? The symbol for the serpent or reptilian or dragon is a symbol in many religions all over the planet. Symbols for the bird beings, humans, are all over the planet. So what are we talking about? This is where the sacred bloodline doctrine finds its genesis. And Genesis in the Bible tells the story of God creating mankind, Adam and Eve, and so much more. We know from our discussions in chapter 1 and 2 of this book that the race that was fashioned by the Anunnaki were not modern human, but Neanderthal. So apparently these Anunnaki did not create we humans of today. they interacted with the Neanderthals to create some kind of slave beings. And I'm not trying to say this stuff is the truth. I'm saying this is the stuff the author says. But I want to know what the author says of all these books I read. I can use my own common sense and I can think this through. I grew up Christian, Catholic. A lot of people grew up maybe Protestant, Islamist, Muslim, maybe they're atheists, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist. We're all humans on planet Earth. So whatever we all do, we need to get over it and get along. But I think there's forces that do not want that to happen. They want to bring us a new age and a new world order, like the Hunger Games movie. Recent scientific findings discovered by the Geographic Project have concluded that all non-Africans, those that descend from Africa Group B, mentioned earlier, have up to 2% Neanderthal DNA. So all non-Africans, white people, yellow people, brown people, have up to 2% Neanderthal DNA in them. In the geographic study, it was discovered that the only distinct race of people that had no trace of Neanderthal DNA in them were the San Bushmen, people whose ancestors, Group A, never left Africa. So the Bushmen in Africa don't seem to have any DNA from Neanderthal man. What does that mean? Thus, the ancestors of the San Bushmen probably never got the chance to meet and mingle with the Neanderthals who inhabited the Middle East and Europe until about 30,000 years ago. The claims that the ancient Sumerians made in their cuneiform epics, the tablets, about being part Anunnaki speaks volumes to the supposed sacred bloodlines that is held in high esteem in the secret societies today. So what is the religion of all these secret societies? Get initiated. Get initiated into what? What do they know? What do they know they don't want us to know? Why do the people who join the Freemasons have to swear under threat of death, having their throats cut, not to divulge the secrets they learn? Why in Morals and Dogma, the Bible for the Freemasons, written by Albert Pike, do they talk about Isis, Osiris, Horus, and other gods of the past? Who are they talking about? Why are they trying to destroy Christianity and the Islam religion and the Middle East? Why did they bring us World War I, World War II, 9/11? So it says right here, according to this author, volumes to the supposed sacred bloodline that is held in high esteem in secret societies today. The bloodline held dear by secret societies will be discussed momentarily. This is the author speaking. For now, we need to get a foundation to stand on by finding out why secret societies believe in the things they believe in. In order to do this, we must first get a stronghold on accurate history instead of his story. History or his story. History or the way people write history. And I'm not trying to do an audiobook. If you like what I'm reading, I'm only reading 2 hours worth and adding my commentary. One chapter, if I get through the whole chapter. You can go online and buy Howard West's book and read it all. But remember what I keep saying. When you get books like this, you can't say it's gospel and this is the truth. You can't say Mithras is the real God and this is the truth. You can't say what these aliens say is the truth and this is the truth. You got to do a little homework and keep an open mind and see that there are people out there with agendas who want to distort the truth, who want to justify what they're doing. That's called rationalization. Even insane, mentally ill people don't run around going, I'm crazy. They rationalize it and think what they're doing is the right thing. They may be mentally damaged, psychopaths, schizophrenics, mind controlled. A lot of that going on right now. All right, so I'm going to tell you some things here shortly that are just amazing and astounding and almost unbelievable, but I've been looking it up and it appears to be true. The ancient Hebrews, now called the Jews by most people in the world. And as I've been discussing in my previous videos, a lot of the Jews, so-called Jews today, inhabiting Israel and other parts of the world, are not Jews, but Khazarians from the north of the Middle East and east of Europe, around where the Ukraine is, Russia is, Poland. These Khazarians converted to Judaism, this religion, 1,000+ years ago, and apparently one of the historic cults of the ancient or older Hebrews was the Kabbalah, which was some kind of magic and witchcraft and sorcery, which they were accused of. They knew some things, how to manipulate nature. Well, where would that come from? Would it come from some beings from another planet? So anyways, the ancient Hebrews, let's start at the very birthing of the Hebrew people, also known in religion as the Israelites. Remember, most of them are not Israelites by the DNA Hebrew standards, because 1,000+ years ago, the nation of Khazaria adopted the Jewish religion, and they were a formidable people, very barbaric and ruthless, next door neighbors to Genghis Khan, the Mongols. Observing them through the lens of religious history and the lens of secular history. So when you go out there and you read about history, you can read about history in the religious books like the Bible, the Quran, the Old Testament, the Jewish books, the Torah, the Talmud, the Zohar, and so many more. Or you can actually find information by the governments back then, secular history, non-religious. So you really have to look at all these documents, the religious information and the non-religious information, and use your brain and try to put two and two together. All right, so we're going to be talking about the Hebrew people, now widely called the Jewish people. And as we know, most of them are not really Jewish by the Hebrew DNA standards. They're Khazarians, white people from the north, a very barbaric, ruthless people up around Russia, 1,000+ years ago. The term Hebrew people, according to widely accepted Bible dictionary, the term Hebrew people is an ethnic term designated the lineage of the nation of Israel and the Jewish people. The origin of the term Hebrew is a mystery to scholars. So what does the word Hebrew mean? Hebrew people, Nelson's New Illustrated Bible Dictionary. The reason Nelson's New Illustrated Bible Dictionary claims the origin of the term Hebrew is a mystery is because to reveal the truth about the origin of the Hebrew people would be revealing a cover-up that has kept a blindfold over humanity's eyes for thousands of years. All right, who were the Hebrews? Let the reader understand there is a wealth of historic knowledge found by archaeologists giving us a clear-cut understanding of how the people of ancient Canaan lived and worshipped. So the area where Palestine was, where Israel is today, since World War II, used to be called the land of Canaan. So Canaan became Palestine and then became Israel after World War II. Ancient people in Canaan lived in worship, but only until around 900 BC, almost 3,000 years ago, is the Israeli god Yahweh and the culture of the biblical Hebrews, the Israelites, visible. So the Hebrews popped out of nowhere into existence about 3,000 years ago. Where did they come from? Who were they? According to this author, I'm not trying to say this is the truth. This is a discussion. I'm reading a book. I had to use my own brain when I was thinking. Before 900 BC, before Christ, the archaeological evidence finds no signs or traces of the existence of the biblical Hebrews termed Israelites. All this will be brought to light later in this chapter. The two faces of the Hebrews. There are two faces to the Hebrew people. One face is given to us through religious history. Literature, Torah, Bible, Quran, etc., and the religious leaders, pastors, priests, popes. So the common knowledge that we all learned when we were growing up, that our parents learned. The other face of the Hebrew people is given to us through secular history, literature, ancient hieroglyphics like on the pyramids in Egypt and other monuments all over the world, ancient hieroglyphics, ancient clay tablet documents, encyclopedias, etc., and scientific experts, religious study professors, archaeologists, anthropologists, etc. So the origin of the Hebrews. In accordance with secular history, non-religious, the Hebrew people are originally known as the Habaru. Well, that was interesting when I read that. I said, wow, that's pretty similar to Nibiru, some planet that's supposed to be coming and causing a pole shift on planet Earth. Meanwhile, they're bringing us the new age and the new world order and trying to destroy decency and Christianity and the Islamic religion and bringing us this clearly decadent, perverted world where anything goes. Why would they do that? And you don't have to look very far to see what I'm saying is the truth. People can be in denial all they want to. Go watch Lucifer, the TV program, Gotham, and the viciousness, Hunger Games movie, Modern Family, 2.5 Men, Seinfeld, where these leading male characters sleep with a different girl every show. They're messing with us. Brokeback Mountain, all this stuff. Talk shows like Ellen DeGeneres, bringing little children on, breaking out in tears that they were treated badly in school because they had 2 mommies or 2 daddies. There's something going on. Even the cartoons that kids watch, this stuff that they're trying to change our reality is a fact. Why? So anyways, the ancient Hebrews were known as the Habaru. You can see it right there, where my finger is. Which reminded me of Nibiru, which is apropos to this conversation, because they are talking about the Anunnaki who come from Nibiru. These people are mentioned on clay tablets dating back to the 18th and 19th centuries BCE, so almost 4,000 years ago. These Habaru people. They're also featured in the Nuzi, Hittite, and Amarna documents of the 14th and 15th centuries BCE, so 3,500 years ago. All right, back to the book. I had to push pause, my phone rang. So religious history tells us that the Hebrew people, the Jews, began through a man named Abraham, but secular history shows no traces of the biblical character Abraham or his sons Isaac, Jacob, Jacob's 12 sons, who the Bible teaches grew into the 12 Hebrew tribes of Israel. So the religious history that we all know, written by these Jewish people, mentions Abraham, Jacob, Jacob's 12 sons, and the 12 Hebrew tribes of Israel. the story we've all been told, but secular history, hieroglyphics on the ancient monuments and other stuff, tablets, Zechariah Stitchins. They don't talk about these characters. So did somebody create this Israelite, Jewish, Hebrew religion? And did they steal components of it from other religions? And not to be unfair, but the Christian religion, established by the Roman Empire because they were sinking like a rock and Christianity was growing, so they embraced it. But obviously they mixed it with a lot of their pagan gods and religions. So apparently everybody was guilty of trying to write history the way they want it to be written. That I do not dispute. But what secular history does show is an ancient group known as the Habaru, the Hebrews. So ancient secular history talks about these people that are called Habarus, later on called Hebrews, who descended from two ancient nomadic clans, nomads, Arabs, shepherds, wanderers, two ancient nomadic clans of yesteryear, one from the Caucasus, would that be the Khazarians? And the other from Arabia, would that be the Arabs? Ancient nomadic clans. Because before people settled down into towns and cities, they used to just wander around like the American Indians and go from place to place and hunt. The group from the Caucasus Mountains were wanderers who came out of the mountainous regions of Europe in or around 2400 to 2200 BCE. So about 42 or 44, 4,400 years ago. And dwelt in the northern Mesopotamia, today's Middle East, where all these countries have been destroyed after 9/11. I think this is all tied together. Which is south of the Caucasus Mountains. Look at a map. This nomadic clan was called the Hurrians. A glimpse of the Hurrians, i.e. the first clan of Caucasoids, to enter the Middle East. So some people from the northern regions, the Caucasian Mountains, came down towards the Middle East. Is probably seen in the early document written by the ancient Sumerians, and the Sumerians would have been people in the Middle East. So did the Hurrians become the Sumerians? Were the Sumerians already there? And what did this have to do with more ancient people, Anunnaki, Nibiru, people from someplace else, building pyramids, sphinxes, and all kinds of other things? That's why I'm reading this material and having a conversation. Maybe we can pull some logic out of this. By the ancient Sumerians during the reign of Shugi, so it must have been some king, in 2150 BCE, so 4,150 years ago. The document describes a class of, okay, here's what these people were described as back then, 4,000 plus years ago. Unclothed people, so they weren't wearing any clothes, who travel in dead silence, who destroy everything, whose menfolk go where they will. They establish their tents and their camps. They spend their time in the countryside without observing the decrees of my king. So apparently these people were troublemakers. And according to the Encyclopedia Judaica, and I've been making many videos out of the materials in the 16 books I have, about this thick, it clearly says that the Hebrews, Jewish people, were having troubles and turmoil and evicted from many different countries for thousands of years. Troublemakers. Why couldn't they get along? I'm not trying to disparage Jewish people or blame it on Arab people or anybody else. I'm trying to find out what's going on. And I'm reading this guy's book. It's lost my place here. All right, so back to the story. So apparently these people came from the Caucasus area. Unclothed people, and apparently not observing any rules, doing whatever they want, causing problems. There is no hard evidence that these people mentioned in the above quote were actually the ancient Hurrians. There is also no real evidence that the Hurrians were a savage people. But we do know for sure that the Hurrians were a people of war who had taken over a few small kingdoms throughout North Ancient Canaan, the Middle East, and ancient Syria. And Syria is under attack right now by the NATO Pentagon alliance, controlled by the secret societies, Illuminati, Freemasons, and other secret cults, apparently controlled by, or at least Israel being a leader, a forefront force behind all this. Look up the Israel bombing the USA ship Liberty, trying to say that the Egyptians were doing it and blame it on them. But our politicians and leaders knew full well who were bombing the smithereens out of that USA ship with American soldiers waving flags at the Israeli jets, trying to tell them, hey, we're your friends. But they didn't know the Israelis had a purpose to this. Propaganda, false flag, blame it on somebody else. The strongest of the Hurrian kingdoms was the kingdom of Metina. The other group of nomadic people, people who are wanderers, the Haburu, apparently the ancient Hebrews, descended from the ancient Amorites. The ancient Amorites were originally from the West Saudi Arabia. So not the Middle East, that would have been south across the Sinai Peninsula in Saudi Arabia, a big country. So you had some nomads coming from the Caucasus into the Middle East, and some Amorites, nomadic people coming from Saudi Arabia into the Middle East, apparently called later on the Hebrews. The ancient Amorites were originally from West Saudi Arabia. According to ancient Sumerian documents, they were a savage people that the ancient Sumerians and ancient Akkadians tried to keep out of the land of ancient Canaan. So the people in the Middle East were trying to keep out these nomadic people coming from the Saudi Arabia area, later called Hebrews. According to the ancient Sumerian court records, the Amorites lived in the wilderness region of what today is Saudi Arabia and southern Syria. In the court records of Akkad and Sumer, they were known as barbarians or uncivilized people. And this was Amorites. You can look it up, Amorites. And this author of this book got that out of Nelson's New Illustrated Bible Dictionary. And please remember, I have the Encyclopedia Judaica here in my office. And I've been looking up some of these people. And so far, it seems to me, this author's telling it like it is. And they would want us to believe that these Habaru, later called Hebrews, are God's chosen people, and they wrote the religion. And again, to be fair, we know that the Rome embraced Christianity and tried to claim it for its own and mixed the miracles of Jesus with the pagan rituals to satisfy and appease all parties. So Jesus was real, in my opinion, and many others. and did create healings, miracles, and casting out demons, and prophesied and everything else, said things that were going to happen that did happen. So apparently the spiritual realm does send prophets or psychics or messiahs or whatever to this world to try to teach us. So we are all spiritual beings, you, me. This world, planet Earth, is only a temporary place we're going to be. Nobody gets off planet Earth alive. So what does the invisible reality, heaven if you want to call it that, or all these materials from these channelers, what do they have to say? Or these ancient religions that was more popular than Christianity, Mithras, this god, and I'll be doing a video on that. What does he have to say? This is series number 158. All right, the Amorites finally settled in the rich land of ancient Canaan 2000 BCE, 4,000 years ago. At that time, they split into three sects: the northern Amorites, the western Amorites, and the eastern Amorites. The Amorites who settled in the north settled in the highland, eventually fell under the Hittite influence. So that was those other nomadic people who came from the Caucasus area, up by Russia, Ukraine, Poland, etc. They emerged years later as a people called the Arameans. The Western Amorites that came from Saudi Arabia, that settled in West Canaan, that would be around where Jerusalem is, it seems, established their own towns on the coastal lands of West Canaan, which would evolve into the lands we now know in history as Phoenicia or Philistia. Okay, moving on. Hope this is making sense. The Amorites then settled in the east. The Amorites that settled in the east, away from the coastline, Mediterranean, settled near the Euphrates River in ancient Babylon. So this would have been around Iraq. These Amorites that settled in the east became known as the mighty Hyksos people. The eastern Amorites are the Amorites we will now turn our attention towards. So apparently some of these nomadic people coming from Saudi Arabia went into three parts of the Middle East. The northern Lebanon area, where Israel is today, Palestine, and over there in Iraq. So these people that came from Saudi Arabia off towards the west, crossed the Sinai Peninsula. A lot of them went to where Jerusalem is, Israel is today. Some of them went to Lebanon, where that is today. And some of them went to the Iraq area. I know where these places are on a map, so I can move my hand around. You can look at a map. West, east, north. Amorites of the east, the Iraqian ones, shortly after the arrival of the eastern Amorites, who would in the future become the mighty Hyksos nation, they began quickly seizing many small towns that were controlled by the ancient Sumerians. Remember, Zacharias Stitchins found the Sumerian tablets. These tablets with all these etchings on them that were interpreted, which apparently, according to Zacharias Stitchin, told about the Anunnaki aliens from Nibiru coming to Earth to mine gold, mixing their DNA with human DNA, Neanderthal man or whatever, to create beings to be slaves for them. So you got your secular history on those tablets, and you got religious history that somebody apparently created. We call the Old Testament and some New Testament, and even the Quran, the Islamic Bible. And of course you have other religions with the Buddhists and Hindus, and the Zoroastrianism, the Mithric religion, which is part of the Zoroastrian religion. Then you got all these different kinds of aliens all over the galaxy, the universe, telling us their story of what they want us to believe by these psychics and channelers. It's a little crazy, doesn't it? What is the truth? These Amorites from the east viewed their Arab brothers. And by the way, anti-Semitic, Semitic means these people, whether they are Arabs that are not Jewish or Arabs or Jewish people. And the Khazarians that converted to Judaism would not be Semitic people, Arab people, brown people. They're very white. And the people who are residing in Israel today, like Benjamin Netanyahu and so many of the other leaders, don't have any Semitic blood in them, so it seems to me they're pretty white. The Khazarians, which were an ancient barbaric people. I'm just trying to figure this out in my own mind. These Amorites from the east viewed their Arab brothers, the Akkadians, who were originally from East Saudi Arabia, as the oppressive imperial power that controlled their only sources of survival, the Euphrates River and the much-needed pastures for their livestock. Note the ancient Eastern Amorites and the ancient Akkadians are the ancestors of today's Arab world. So some of these people divided themselves away from these other cousins of theirs and called themselves Hebrews. But apparently they were all nomadic people coming from the Saudi Arabian area, mixing with the Sumerians, and some other peoples were coming from the north, mixing with the Sumerians. I guess there would be a lot of trouble going on for quite a while since then. And I think this has a lot to do with the New Age and the New World Order today. They don't tell we the people the truth. Amorites coming into power. After the ancient Sumerians' Babylonian kingdom was taken over by a group called the Elamites, the Eastern Amorites conquered the Elamites and took the city of Babylon from them. So these Amorites conquered the city of Babylon in Iraq. The Eastern Amorites established their authority as the absolute Arabian Semitic power when they crushed the Elamites and started what is called the Old Babylonian Kingdom. Interestingly enough, when I was going over the Talmud, not the Talmud, but the Kabbalah, I've been going over the Talmud too. But in here, it does say that the Kabbalah and the Book of Enoch and all that, there is a Babylonian version of the Kabbalah or the Book of Enoch or other documents. And then there was the Jerusalem area versions of the Talmud, the Book of Enoch and other documents. So these people were carrying their religion with them, and those different religions were developed in the Jerusalem, Palestine, Canaan, now called Israel area, and were developing in Babylon, Iraq, and those areas, and other places in North Africa. So these things were evolving, and they did fight each other for domination. At that time, the Eastern Amorites made the ancient Babylonian kingdom their capital city. So these ancient peoples who became the Hebrews conquered the Babylonian kingdom. The ancient city Babylon, the mighty ancient city of Babylon, was situated along the Euphrates River, about 300 miles northwest of the Persian Gulf, and about 30 miles southwest of the modern Baghdad in Iraq. And we know during World War, I shouldn't say World War, but during the war after 9/11, I can get my history right in my head here. After 9/11, when President Bush and the NATO Pentagon alliance again controlled in cahoots with Israel, invaded Iraq because of the weapons of mass destruction that did not exist. There's plenty of evidence and material written and published that a lot of these invaders made beelines to the museums. They're looking for some technologies or ancient documents, and they're digging all over the sands, and they're using satellite systems like X-ray systems, and looking in the sand for other cities or tablets. Somebody's trying to rewrite history or find something. According to the ancient Sumerian epic of the Anunnaki, who, according to some channeled material that I've been going over in my books, the Anunnaki are the reptilians. And apparently these beings became the royal bloodline, which are behind the pharaohs and kings and queens, with vast amounts of superior secret knowledge, and have been controlling mankind and killing off we the people whenever they wanted to. Just remember that with the things that are going on today, dumping chemicals in the sky, HAARP microwave transmitters, all these computer spying systems and all this. We're in trouble, and we need to recognize who the culprits are and what they're doing, in my opinion. This is the same area where the Anunnaki aliens first tried to obtain the much-needed gold for their diminishing empire. So these aliens, what human beings would they use to control other human beings? Were these Anunnaki aliens something the ancient Hittites or Hiskuls thought were gods, and these gods, these Anunnaki, were telling them that they were God's chosen people and they had to rule over the rest of us? Were these aliens using some humans to control the rest of the humans through these fake religions? Just questioning these things in my mind. And I do believe there is a spiritual world. And I do believe it interacts with this world. And I think in the spiritual world there are good entities, and I think there are bad entities. It is written that this is also the same area where their base headquarters of operation was. That would be these Anunnaki aliens, reptilian beings, and where the first human, remember they needed slaves, so they mixed their DNA with Neanderthal man, maybe, to create the Adamu, the Bible's Adam, was fashioned. In the ancient Sumerian story, the area called Eden, equivalent to the Bible's Eden, the natives of the area, the ancient Sumerians, considered the area sacred. This ancient Sumerian holy site was the site where one of the oldest cities of the ancient world was erected. The architects and builders of the ancient Babylonian city are unknown, although tradition says it was built by the Babylonian god Marduk. Marduk. It is more than likely that its builders were the ancient Sumerian people who had migrated out of Egypt in the earlier years and settled in the region. They are among the earliest inhabitants of the region. So let me see if I can find a little bit of info about Marduk. I went and grabbed my Morals and Dogma, the Bible for the Freemasons. I did not find Marduk, but I found Mithras. You can see there where it says Mithras. So who is this Mithras god in the that's that other book I've been reading, but I'm trying to connect the dots. Mythic initiations, mythic mysteries. Mythic mysteries flourished in the Roman Empire. Mythic mysteries connected with the heavenly bodies. Mithras, a Tau cross inscribed on the forehead of the initiate. A Tau cross is a T, which means divine, with a circle on it, the top, which is represented as the serpent, the divine serpent, hooked up, connected with the Mithric religion, which apparently is tied in with this book, the Anunnaki, who are also proclaimed to be the reptilian beings that mix their DNA, according to these historic authors, Zachariah Stitchin's tablets and other people, this guy here, Howard West, and many others, and according to the channeled material I've been reading. So the Marduk, lordy, this is a crazy piece of research. So I looked up Marduk, try to refresh my mind. It's in Zachariah Stitchin's book, The Lost Book of Enki. And see the big planetary body here? Nibiru. Threats of this planetary system with a star called Nemesis, or the Destroyer, with its planets, one being Nibiru, which apparently carried these Anunnaki aliens, mentioned in Howard West's book I'm going over right now, and that they had a god named Marduk, which was one of the Anunnaki leaders. It says here in the index, Marduk, firstborn son and legal heir of Enki and Damkina, worshipped as Ra. That blew me away. I made a video on the book of Ra, the Ra material. I made a video on this book. In Egypt, jealous of his brothers, unsatisfied with Egypt alone as his domain, claimed and after exiles and wars attained supremacy on earth from his city in Babylon. And I just went on the internet, Yahoo image site, and looked up Marduk, M-A-R-D-U-K. So apparently he was one of the beings called a god, one of the Anunnaki, sons of Enki, vying for leadership or domination of that country. Zachariah Stitchin's book, with the planet Nibiru coming, which is supposed to cause a pole shift. What do you believe? And I made a video on this one. The Book of Enki was series number 102, and on the channeled material, the Ra material, the god that apparently Marduk worshipped, was 122 in my series. I made videos on this book. And all these books I made a video on, I'll be making parts 2 and part 3, circling all these books again because I'm gaining some knowledge. So just saying, when I'm reading Howard West's books and I see this information, it triggers my memory. Oh my, so the ancient gods of Babylonia that were involved with these people from Saudi Arabia, the Hyksos and the I gotta remember the names of these, the Ermites and the Hurrians, the ancient people that were later called the Hebrews and Jews. The tradition was Babylon was built by the god Marduk, who was mentioned in Zachariah Stitchin's book, who worshipped Ra, who was mentioned in the Ra material, with the funny thing about it, has the Egyptian hieroglyphics on the channeled raw material, connecting the dots. So back to reading this book and this story about the Middle East, and a little history involving religion, Mithraism, Marduk, Ra, Anunnaki, Hyksos, Hurrians, Amorites, people, nomadic people coming from Saudi Arabia off towards the west, and coming from the north, the Caucasus, around Ukraine, Poland, Russia, etc. What do they tell people? They don't tell us the truth. So these were among the earliest inhabitants of the region. History tells us that as early as 2300 BCE, 4,300 years ago, the Sumerian king Sargon the Great united the people of Babylonia under his rule. So this is where the Hebrews came from. The story gets much more interesting. But the most famous of the Babylonian kings is Hammurabi from ca. 1792 to 1750 BCE, so 3,750 years ago. He is known for organizing the Babylonian laws into the written system referred to by scholars as the Code of Hammurabi. Guess I'll have to find that. Look it up. Bloodline from the Sumerian to the Hyksos. So you can see how these Zechariah Stitchin's Sumerian tablets are tying in with the Anunnaki, tying in with the Sumerians, tying with the nomadic people, migrating from Saudi Arabia, migrating from the north. And these people later on, some of them became the Hebrews that we know today. And all the other Arabs are Semites too. So unless you're just an anti-Semite and you don't like Arabs, but if you just don't like what the Jewish people are doing in the world behind the cloak of a cult called the Kabbalah with the Illuminati and mysticisms, stuff I've been going over in many of my videos and books I read, if you just single out you don't like the people that are into witchcraft and sorcery and the Kabbalah, then they'll call you an anti-Semite, but you might want to be defending the Arabs, which are Semites. So it's quite confusing, and it is a fabrication and a thing made up so people won't talk about the truth. So bloodline from Sumerian Hyksos. Sometime around 2000 BCE, the Eastern ancient Amorites and the ancient Hurrians and the native ancient Sumerians, you see what I'm saying? These people came from the north and the west, Saudi Arabia, the Caucasus, and mixed in with the ancient Sumerians, apparently that were created by the Anunnaki aliens. Began mixing their bloodlines and over the years formed the mighty Hyksos people. These are the people later called the Hebrews. Isn't that interesting where they may have come from? The Hyksos would be the first monarchs to rule the ancient world with a recognized sacred bloodline connection to the Anunnaki aliens. So are the people in Israel today trying to bring us a new age, a new world order connected with the Anunnaki aliens who apparently, according to channeled material, were reptilians and shapeshifters, and the symbols for all these cults and groups is serpent. Even the Tau, an ancient Egyptian symbol, means the T is divine, the circle is serpent, divine serpent. It's even in the, I've gone over the Tau when I read from the Morals and Dogma, the Bible for the Freemasons, and a lot of these other books about ancient Egypt, hieroglyphic symbolism, in the Middle East, and all these cults, Rosicrucians, Freemasonry, Kabbalists, mysticism. Wow. Their capital city would become ancient Babylon, the city that the Bible's book of Revelation refers to. Wow. Get this. Babylon the Great, the mother of the whores, and the abomination of the earth. Revelations 13-5. Go look it up. And these are the people bringing us these doom and gloom, catastrophe coming, planet Nibiru's on its way, and Earth is going to have a pole shift. And half the planet's going to be underwater, and they even have maps. Even Channel or Nancy Leader on ZetaTalk.com with the alien beings talk about the pole shift and how the planet's going to look. So the channeled material definitely is involved with all of this. So are the secret societies and all these cults. So it's the thing behind the New Age and the New World Order. They want to bring us a new deity, a new god to worship. And apparently it's demonic, satanic, Luciferic, whatever, Ra. And the people who do not go along with the New World Order apparently will be beheaded. This is not funny. Let the reader understand that there are no traces of the ancient Sumerians found in history after 1800 BCE, so 3,800 years ago, according to this author. There are no traces of the ancient Sumerians found. The so-called sacred bloodline of the Anunnaki, that be the bloodline that held dear to the ancient Sumerians, now flowed in the veins of the new people termed Hyksos, Hyksos. And you know I looked up Hyksos. You gotta know that. I didn't believe this author. And as you shall see, the Hyksos would not look on this bloodline lightly. So can we call these people Jewish people? Formulating a system of beliefs and ways of thinking that is prevalent even today. Again, I state there are no traces of the ancient Sumerians found in history after 1800 BC, 3,800 years ago. At this time, the Hyksos had total control of the ancient Babylonian kingdom. The Hyksos in Egypt. And you can see what I do. I read and highlight. As mentioned above, the ancient Hurrians mixed bloodlines with the ancient Sumerians and the ancient Amorites of the East. After a few hundred years of mixing, the new people surfaced known to us in history as Hyksos, which means foreign rulers. And who are these people that have dispersed all over the world, called the diaspora, Hebrews, Jewish people, who have been exiled and banished from country after country for the last couple thousand years? But here, Hyksos means foreign rulers. So wherever these people went, whatever they knew, whatever secret religion they had, knowledge, they were using it for power and control, and they irritated nations after nations to have them exiled and banished and controlled, and they were called Jewish people. Even during the Civil War, Ulysses Grant, the general, banned the Jewish people from the Tennessee territories on the Encyclopedia Judaica. I made a video about that, anti-Semitism in America. Why did Ulysses Grant, a general for the, I think the South, maybe the North, in the United States, ban the Jews from the Tennessee territories? Why? And are they these Hyksos? What's that got to do with World War I, World War II? The Civil War in the United States, civil wars in other countries all over the world, revolutions, communism. I think it has everything to do with it. The Egyptian historian Manetho from ca. the 3rd century BC, so 300 years BC, 2,300 years ago, gives us our first look at the Hyksos people as he documented the horrific story of how these people once crushed mighty ancient Egypt. Well, wait a minute, I said to myself. Weren't the Hebrews enslaved by the Egyptians? Did somebody rewrite history? Here it says the Hyksos, these people, once crushed mighty ancient Egypt. It is from these same Hyksos people where we find the true origin of the Hebrews. Hyksos or Hebrew? For reasons that will be revealed, we are taught through religion that the ancient Hebrews originated in the Bible's Old Testament character Abraham, who fathered a son named Isaac, who in time fathered a son named Jacob, who in time fathered 12 sons, which became the 12 families. Wow, so that reminds me of something else interesting. The bloodline of the Illuminati, the 12 families who were fathered by Jacob, the 12 tribes, and finally the 12 nations of Israel. But the truth of the matter is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob never really existed. See Memorandum 1 in the back of this book. According to secular history, the first Hebrew people were a very small group of Hyksos people out of ancient East Canaan, later called Palestine, now called Israel, and actually the previous ancient boundaries of Canaan was larger, and apparently they intend to take all that land back for the current nation of Israel. And their plans are globalism, a new world order. They intend to rule the world. This I have no doubt. The secret societies, not all Jewish people. You can't be anti-Semite because all the Arabs that are being killed are Semites also. Sometimes around 1890 BCE, this small group left East Canaan. I'll be off towards the east, the Orient, China, India, Thailand, Vietnam, Japan, that's east. East Canaan, and journeyed through Canaan to the land of ancient Egypt, which is on the west. The metropolis of the world at that time. So it was like the New York City at that time, or the London of that time. In search for work as craftsmen and builders. The Egyptians called this small assembly of Hyksos descent the Habaru, which is where we get the term Hebrew, which reminds me of Nibiru. Coincidence, you think? In the Hebrew language, the term Hebrew means one from beyond. So who would have thunk of that? Hebrew means one from beyond. That's in Strong's Hebrew Greek lexicon, some kind of encyclopedia. The painting in the tomb. There's a painting in the tomb from the time of Sesostris II, 1890 BCE, showing 37 people from ancient Canaan who traveled to ancient Egypt. Most secular historians agree that these people are the Hyksos people mentioned above who left East Canaan. But religious scholars argue that with this claim, saying that the people drawn in the painting are the Hebrew Israelites of the Bible. So it appears they're one and the same. So while I was reading that, trying to put this together and see if the author of that book was steering us in the right direction, I went to the Encyclopedia Judaica, 1973 edition, published in Israel, and looked up Hiskos. We can't say that this is deception or a lie, can we? Hiskos, a dynasty of Asiatics. Middle East is Asiatic, Asia, country called the Middle East, who exercised political control over Egypt between approximately 1655 and 1570 BCE. So these Hiskos, who were later called Hebrews, who were supposed to be enslaved by the Egyptians, actually invaded Egypt and became its rulers. Well, that's an interesting turn of events. They don't teach us that, do they? It's in the Encyclopedia Judaica, page 1141. The Hiskos established their capital in Avrias in the eastern delta. Remember, Egypt has the Nile River, the pyramids, the Sphinx. Controlled the Nile Valley as far south as Hermopolis, and claimed overlordship over the rest of Upper Egypt. So the Hiskos, also known as the Hebrews, actually managed to take control of Egypt. A mixture of Semites and Hurrians, to judge from their names, they were known to the contemporary Egyptian as the Hiko Koshwi, the rulers of foreign lands. So it seems my friend here, Howard West, in The Blood Prince of the Gods, has got some of his facts correct. After having infiltrated into the Nile Valley over a period of several centuries, they managed to seize the kingship during the chaotic period which ended the Egyptian Middle Kingdom. At the beginning of the 18th dynasty, 1580 BCE, that's 30,580 years ago, Pharaoh Amos expelled the Hiskos, later called the Hebrews, from Egypt and pursued them to southern Palestine. So the Egyptians actually ran them out of town all the way to Palestine, now called Israel. And not, apparently, according to the way the Bible teaches, that they were enslaved, and Moses, through the aid of God helping him, causing the plagues and other things, escape slavery. There's a contradiction here. What's really happened? In the Encyclopedia Judaica. After besieging Sharuhen in the south for 3 years, he defeated them. So this Pharaoh, the leader in Egypt, rose up and defeated these Hiskos, who later became the Hebrews. His successors, Amophilus, Tumisius I, and Tumisius III, completed their expulsion from Egypt. It appears that the Hiskos were not a homogeneous people with a specific culture of their own. However, new cultural elements distinguish the period of Hiskos rule in Egypt, although it is not certain whether these elements can be related to the migration of the Hiskos. Two such elements are the realm of military warfare and the area of material culture. Hiskos centers were constructed with a unique system of fortification, aimed at improving the defensive capabilities of the city. For this purpose, the city wall was surrounded by a glacis, around where a deep ditch was dug. So I guess you could call that a moat. The horse and chariot also made their appearance in Egypt during the rule of the Hyksos. So these Hebrews brought the horse and chariot warfare. And apparently maybe they were some derivative of these Anunnaki reptilian aliens with their Kabbalistic and mysticism religion. But again, there is no evidence that they were introduced specifically by the Hyksos. Similarly, the Hyksos migration may be related to a new type of ceramic called the Tel Yahidian ceramics, named after the capital of the Hyksos, Abydos, which a Tel Yahidian, where this type was first discovered. So apparently they had some kind of new ceramic technology to manufacture bowls and plates or whatever. The vessels which characterize this group of ceramics are small juglets and bowls, brown-gray in color, decorated with geometric designs, and made of punchers filled with white chalk. Although never really accepted by the Egyptians, the Hyksos nevertheless quickly attempted to Egyptianize and assimilate Egyptian culture. So the Egyptians apparently knew a lot about magic, metaphysics, and these Hyksos were learning this knowledge. They were assimilating the Egyptian culture. This synthesis is attested by the Hyksos religion. Their chief god was the Egyptian god Seth. Remember, I've been reading from Jane Roberts' book, who was channeling Seth. I keep finding these names in all these books as beings that channelers and psychics are communicating with, including that one book I showed you from the Cosmos. Angela Smith, I showed you at the beginning of this video. She's in communication with 18 different kinds of aliens. So the book says. I just happened to notice this, whether it's Seth or Ra or Cryon with Lee Carroll. So doing the channeled material book reviews apparently is quite appropriate. Their chief god was the Egyptian god Seth, brother and enemy of Horus. Now remember, the all-seeing eye on the US $1 bill represents Horus, the all-seeing eye, in the Egyptian hieroglyphics. But in addition to him, they also worshipped the Canaanite Horite gods Resham, Astaroth, and Anath. So I'm confident when I continue to go over my channel material, I'm going to run across these beings and their names from another dimension, communicating with people in this dimension, giving us information, good or bad. In Contra Apona, Josephus, attempting to establish the great antiquity of the Jews, quotes the history of the Ptolemaic Egyptian writer Mentio, who describes a brutal, savage invasion of Egypt by a people from the east, their period of domination in Egypt, and their subsequent expulsion by the rulers of the 18th dynasty. Remember, I'm reading from the Encyclopedia Judaica. Stuff that Howard West is talking about in Bloodprints of the Gods. The Bible teaches us Christians that God helped Moses with all those miracles, plagues, lightning from the sky, turning the water red as blood or whatever. And they were God's chosen people. But the story I'm reading about right here doesn't seem to add up. Seems they are a warrior type people bent on domination, took over Egypt and were finally expelled And it looks like these people with the Illuminati and all their secret societies and cults, high-level Freemasons, Rosicrucianism, witchcraft, and everything else, Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, thousands of these organizations all over the planet, creating books like Lucifer Magazine, the New Age Magazine, Lucifer Publishing Company, and all these satanic, demonic symbolism we see everywhere these days. Just saying, it is what it is. Mentheo called these Asiatic invaders Hyksos and interpreted their name as meaning king shepherds. So these Hebrews, these Hyksos, were called king shepherds. Although Josephus claimed Manetho also had an alternative interpretation, captive shepherds instead of king shepherds, Hyksos might mean captive shepherds. Josephus identified the Hyksos as the patriarchal Jews. That's what it says here. So these Jewish fathers, the leaders, Josephus identified the Hyksos as the patriarchal Jews. Page 1140 in the Encyclopedia Judaica. Volume 8. And if you go on a used book site like abebooks.com, I bought this book for like $3 with free shipping. So you can go verify what I've been reading. Wow. So Josephus, a famous person, identified the Hyksos as the patriarchal Jews, equating their appearance in Egypt with the Jewish story in Genesis and their subsequent expulsion with the biblical tale of Exodus. I don't know if it's this crazy story that's making me choke up or the peanuts I just ate in the kitchen a minute ago. Well, wow, this story is crazy. He made this identification partially following Manetho, who made the expelled Hyksos together with a host of lepers and founders of Jerusalem, partially because the Hyksos were shepherds and captives, and indeed sheep breeding was the hereditary custom of our remote ancestors, the nomadics, who would travel around with their sheep, like we started out in this video. And Joseph told the king of Egypt that he was a captive. Following assumptions of Manetho and Josephus, some scholars have attempted to set the Exodus within the chronological framework of the 18th dynasty, but with little success. So isn't that crazy? So what we think about the Egyptians enslaving the Hebrews was apparently the Hyksos, Hebrews, who had invaded Egypt and took over the leadership of the country. Something that's not unknown today of what the Hebrews have done for thousands of years and caused them to be banished and exiled from many different places. All right, I'm trying to finish what I'm reading from the Encyclopedia Judaica. Obviously, we should believe what's in this book. It's published in Israel. All right, there is no warrant either in the Bible or outside it for equating the Hyksos with the latter Hebrews. So remember, this is the Encyclopedia Judaica, and they are trying to say here there's no equating one with the other. But what I have just read in this book, this encyclopedia, tells me a different story. Why would they put that sentence here? Especially what I'm about to read next. There is no warrant either in the Bible or outside it for equating the Hyksos with the latter Hebrews. So they're saying the Bible doesn't equate the Hebrews with these Hyksos. Although it is not impossible that some of the latter may have been ultimately descended from some of the Hyksos. So they're saying it's not impossible that these Hebrews were the Hyksos, who came from Saudi Arabia, nomadic people, and invaded the Sumerian area with the Sumerians, and the other nomadic people came from the north, invaded the Sumerian area, and all of these people intermarried and mixed their DNA and thus produced the Arabs we know today and the Hebrews. Of special significance is the fact that some of the Hyksos rulers, it's in this book here, the encyclopedia, bore distinctly Semitic names, so the Hyksos were the Hebrews, and they did go in and try to conquer Egypt. Wasn't Egypt invading the land of Canaan and bringing all those Hebrews to Egypt as slaves? The Hyksos, the Hebrews, were already there invading Egypt, taking over the country, and not treating people very nice, according to what I've been reading. Hence, maybe their incarceration and banishment, exiled as they were for 2,000 years, and all this other material and all these other books I've been going over. I'm just trying to get to the truth of this. Who is behind the New Age and the New World Order? Who's dumping chemicals in our sky and using the HAARP transmitters all over the world and getting ready to install even greater technologies with the 5G network, where microwave energies will be permeating everything? Everything will be under the control of some beast computers, and these are the people and the history behind it. So it's got these Semitic names, and one of the kings of the period is named Shisha, which is similar to the name Shahi, one of the ruling families of the Karath Abba. And that's in the Bible, Judge 1-10, I guess. In biblical Palestine, now called Israel, and they had to do World War I, World War II, and 9/11 to put all this together, plus much more, take over the USA money supply, cause revolutions. These people have been the bane of civilization for quite a while. And it's not all Jewish people. A lot of Jewish people have written books, made speeches, trying to warn the rest of us. I've made videos about those books. Gave those speeches in my videos if you go watch. Benjamin Friedman, go look him up. Don't believe me. Highly regarded, intelligent Jewish guy who tells us all this stuff. Who's behind the New World Order, World War I, World War II, 9/11, and all this chaos and anarchy in our world today. There is a future looming, and it doesn't look good unless we wake up. All right. The Hyksos, let's see. For all the shepherds are abhorrent to Egyptians. As mentioned, the Hyksos were called the king shepherds by Josephus. Similarly, Avius, the capital of the Hyksos, is Zon, Z-O-A-M. And we all know about the Zionist, Z-I-A-N, Zion, Z-I-O-N. That's kind of interesting that those words are so similar. Of which it is said Hebron was founded 7 years before Zon in Egypt. This is in Numbers in the Bible, 13:22. Zon, i.e. Avius, was built in 1725 to 1575 BCE, and it is assumed that the reference is to the building of these places by the Hyksos after their first conquest. So the Hyksos were later called the Hebrews. There are 2 instances where the history of the Hyksos is connected with Palestine. The first is during the beginning of their penetration into Egypt, since their domination over Lower Egypt must have been preceded by control over Palestine. The second is during the decline of the Hyksos, when they were expelled from Egypt. They weren't rescued by Moses, according to the Encyclopedia Judaica here that I'm reading, that most people believe the story of God's chosen people. By the rulers of the 18th dynasty northward towards southern Palestine. It is not surprising, therefore, to find signs and distinguish the cultural characteristics of the rule of the Hyksos in Egypt and also in Palestine. The fortification system of the Hyksos capital, Avios, including the glacis and the ditch, appear in most contemporary tales of Palestine. Shahrubim, so it's got these books here. Similarly, ceramics of the Tel Hayyadid type appeared in the strata of the tales which date of that period. So that's what's in the Encyclopedia Judaica. Now I did have another book. I like to go do some research. The Countryman's Edition of Moray's Ancient Peoples. So I decided to look up Hyksos. In this book published, Moray's Ancient Peoples, published in 1933. So Moray was a college professor in the United States in 1933. So when he wrote this book, it was for people across the United States back in 1933. Everything was kind of rural. Wasn't like today, we didn't have the internet. So they had these little encyclopedias or history books. So what does it say about Hyksos? It's got some interesting pictures in here. A bas relief showing Assyrians flaying alive captured prisoners. So apparently they captured this prisoner and they are flaying him, cutting off his skin. Like you would fillet a fish or a deer. So I was trying to find my information about Hyksos here. So I went to the back of this book. And when I read about this yesterday, I looked up Hyksos. Got to find my place again, pardon me. HY. Page 35. Okay, so where am I here? Oh, I have my little tab here. I didn't see it. So I read this yesterday. So let me read you this, what it says in Moray's Ancient Peoples, published in 1933. The Hyksos. This period of prosperity was brought to an end about 1800 BC, 3,800 years ago, by invaders. So they're talking about the Valley of the Nile. See the top here? So the period of prosperity in Egypt, according to this book, the prosperity was brought to an end about 1800 BCE by invaders coming from Asia across the Sinai Peninsula. So here's Israel today, formerly Palestine, land of Canaan. You go towards the west, you have to cross the Sinai Peninsula, and then you enter Egypt. If you look at a map. The Hyksos, as they were called, came with war horses and chariots and conquered all Egypt. At first they ruled harshly, but later, adopting Egyptian customs, their rule was milder. After conquering Egypt for over a century, 100 years, They were driven out by the Theban princes. The Hyksos brought Egypt into closer relationship with Syria. They introduced the war horse and the war chariot into Egypt. And through their military rule, they made the Egyptians more material in spirit. Egyptian history, this is page 35, from about 1600 to 1100 BC, so 36 to 31, 3,100 years ago, or the Theban period. After the expulsion of the Hyksos, the Egyptians changed by the rules of these foreigners from a peace-loving people into an energetic, warlike nations. So these Hyksos, maybe formerly called, later on called Hebrews, went in and invaded Egypt, and after they left, the Egyptian nation was an energetic and warlike nation. Remember, they brought us World War I, World War II. This would be the Rothschilds Illuminati. Even Rothschild's mother said, you can look this up, don't believe me. If my son does not want war, there will not be war. So if that's true with these leaders who are the financial backers behind the Zionism, Illuminati, communism, that if they did want war, there will be war. I've got books about the financing of Hitler and all this other stuff, the causes of World War I, World War II, and Israeli Mossad agents apparently involved in 9/11. This is all stuff you can verify. Entered upon an age of conquest. So after they were exiled from Egypt, Egypt became an age of conquest, and apparently there's plans for a new age in the New World Order. Thebes was the capital of Egypt in this new era, and at this city there flourished a long line of powerful rulers. So you can see I went to a couple sources here, the Encyclopedia Judaica, Morey's book published in 1933, to kind of check on this Howard West author to see what he wrote. So back to this book. So there's this painting of these people in ancient times. You can see that it's like an Egyptian hieroglyphic drawing or painting from back then. They say the painting on the wall aligns with the biblical account depicting Jacob and his family exiting ancient Canaan and entering Egypt to live under the instructions of Joseph in order to be safeguarded from a famine that supposedly fell upon ancient Canaan. So there was a prophecy back then. Somebody was interpreting, I think Joseph was interpreting the Pharaoh's dream. And Joseph was sold by his brothers to these Egyptians to be a slave. And the Pharaoh wanted to know what the dream meant. And Joseph told him there was going to be a 7-year famine. And there was. And so the king, the Pharaoh, stockpiled a lot of grain to survive the famine. This is a biblical story. So apparently later on, the other Hyksos or Hebrews went to Egypt to get a job and something to eat because of the famine in the land of Canaan, which became Palestine, which is now Israel. People don't think all this stuff is connected to what's going on today, and I beg to differ. It is connected. They're not trying to destroy Christianity for nothing. What kind of God are they going to give us? Messages from Maitreya, the Christ. Go watch my videos or go online and read the Ra material. Who's Ra? The god of Marduk? Who's Marduk? One of the Anunnaki aliens? Zachariah Stitchens? What other kind of gods did they have over there in Europe that was even larger than Christianity back then? From India to Iran to Rome, Mithras. We got to talk about this. I got this book in the mail, channeled material. Voices from the Cosmos. Who are these beings that they're channeling with all these ancient names like Seth and Abraham? Just trying to figure out what's going on here. But this cannot be a picture of Jacob and his family. I get hoarse after speaking too much. Pardon me. According to the biblical account, there were a grand total of 66 people who left ancient Canaan to live in ancient Egypt. Genesis 46:7-26 in the Bible. The biblical account later contradicts itself in the New Testament, putting the number at 75 people. Acts 7-14. One thing is certain. The painting does not support the biblical account. With the Bible's contradictory number count, the Bible account doesn't support itself. The painting in the tomb more than likely displays what most secular scholars suggest. The first Hyksos, this is in this book. You can go online and find it. And I'm only reading a tidbit, but apparently he's combining the Anunnaki aliens with Marduk and people, nomads going into Middle East, where Israel is today, and Syria and Iraq, all the countries that have been under attack since 9/11 and before. They had to even cause World War I and World War II to destroy the Ottoman Empire, which controlled the Middle East from Turkey. Nobody teaches the correct sequence of events. They had to take over the USA money supply in 1913, days before Christmas, which then they started World War I 6 months later. If they did not take over the United States money supply, they wouldn't have been able to finance World War I and charge the bill to the USA taxpayers. I made videos on the books detailing this information. Apparently, 50 years prior to 1913, the Illuminati, Rothschilds, Hebrews, Hyksos, people into the Kabbalah, and these secret society cults did not control the USA money supply, and several presidents have been murdered or poisoned trying to avoid these entities from controlling our money supply. Try to remember the series number on that book review. I believe it was this book here that details all that, The Secret Terrorist. So we're talking about this history thousands of years ago. We're talking about World War I, World War II, things happening in the last couple hundred years, revolutions. Nestor Webster, I made videos on these books. This one is 151, you can go watch. This one is 148. World Revolution, the plot against civilization. Do you notice the similarity in this conversation? You want to know who's behind it? It is very important to note and remember, as mentioned earlier, that the first Hyksos people that entered Egypt became the Hebrews, spoken of in secular history. So in the documentation, they can find the scrolls, cuneiform tablets, hieroglyphics, secular history. This is the story they're telling. No historical record in Egypt. The ancient Egyptian documented history of the Hebrews living in Egypt is very definite, as we shall see momentarily. But let the reader understand the Egyptian records do not support things like the 10 plagues of the god Yiwa cast down on Egypt, as the Bible claims. So when they go over the Egyptian tablets and documents, they don't find the same story that's in the Bible. Neither do any Egyptian records mention the defeat of the Egyptian pharaoh and his army at the Red Sea, which is found in the Bible's book of Exodus 7.15. And I've never been a big fan of the Old Testament. I believe in the New Testament, and the New Testament tells us we are to love one another as Jesus taught. Many Jews will tell you that the New Testament does not apply to them. They're supposed to abide by the Old Testament. So did somebody write this Old Testament and write history as they want it told? The Old Testament is the religion of the ancient Hebrews, Jews, apparently called Hiskus, who were nomadic people who went in and conquered Samaria and intermixed with the bloodlines of those people, which were, according to this material, not that I believe it or don't believe it, I'm still studying, were descendants of some alien beings and their bloodline of reptilian aliens that David Icke talks about, and everybody else, all kinds of YouTube videos about people being seen as shape-shifting. What are we to believe? One Christian commentary explaining why Egyptians would not document such monumental events states, "But this would hardly be expected, since the Egyptians seldom recorded any of their defeats." Well, this author says, my question to that commentator is this: would the ancient Egyptians, who documented almost everything, not document their slave count? So maybe the Egyptians didn't want to document that the slaves had escaped or something, but they would document their numbers of slaves, like their numbers of goats or numbers of land or baskets of wheat or whatever. The biblical account draws a picture of ancient Egypt enslaving millions of people for the sole purpose of erecting enormous monuments. So that's what the Bible would have us believe. But the archaeological evidence for the inner workings of the ancient Egyptian culture tells a completely different story. According to this author, the modern archaeological evidence indicates that there were no slaves involved in erecting the great ancient Egyptian monuments. On the contrary, those who built the great monuments were ancient Egypt were well-paid Egyptian citizens who were fed well and were provided housing and good medical care. Although the ancient Egyptians did have slaves, captives of war, which was a practice in which all the great nations of that time partook, but there is no evidence that the Egyptians held the magnitude of slaves the Bible claims. Nor is there any evidence of the Egyptians systematically enslaved an entire race. And I do believe the Bible, some of the material, was concocted. We already know that. The Council of Nicene, I think it's 344 years after Jesus, they did dicker and negotiate a deal to make Christianity the law of the land of Rome, and they mixed it with the pagan religions of that time, which has nothing to do with whether Jesus existed or not. It's just that the Rome was failing and needed to recapture itself, and Christianity was rising and growing and expanding. So they made a common sense decision. If you can't fight them, join them. But they distorted Christianity, so it seems, in my opinion. In the Old Testament, it seems that somebody wrote that book to tell history of these chosen people in a religious light that a lot of people would believe. What is the truth? I read books and go over things. I'm not going to stop believing in Jesus, and I don't think the Islamic people, Muslims, are going to stop believing in the Prophet Muhammad, no more than I think the Chinese are going to stop believing in Buddha, or the Hindus are going to stop believing in their deities. I just don't like what's going on with them dumping chemicals in the sky, planning on this new age and new world order. That's where I'm coming from. killing all kinds of Arabs, causing all kinds of terror events, giving us genetically modified foods, putting fluoride in the water, toxins in the vaccines. Who knows what they're dumping in the sky every day? But back to the book. I can get off track. Other than in the monotheistic religions, monotheistic, one God, books like the Bible and the Torah, there is no historical records found, not just in Egypt, but in the entire world, that the claims of the Habaru, Hyksos, Hebrews, or biblical Hebrews, were ever in bondage in Egypt, according to this author. If the Hebrews had been slaves in ancient Egypt, the Egyptians would have definitely documented, for they documented just about everything else. A slave count would not have been a record of defeat, but a victory on ancient Egypt's behalf. Contrary to what religious history has taught us over the centuries, the Hebrews, Hyksos, the nomads who came from Saudi Arabia, mixed with the Sumerians, conquered the lands, and then, I guess, according to this material, went over even into Egypt and conquered those lands, were never in bondage in Egypt. As I stated above, a small group of Hyksos people left ancient Canaan, then called Palestine, then called Israel, because of 9/11, World War I, World War II. The Zionists have been pursuing this goal for a long time. And the Zionists are part of the people who created communism. And they have a twisted version of socialism, which is a deception. But then again, they control our politicians. They control the money supply. They have plans for a new age and a new world order. And I guess it's nothing new. All right. As I stated above, a small group of Hyksos people left ancient Canaan, East ancient Canaan, and journeyed through Canaan to the land of ancient Egypt in search of work as craftsmen and builders. And it was in ancient Egypt where this small group of Hyksos people got their name, the Habaru, which is where we get the name Hebrew. The Hebrews living in Egypt. As the Hebrew, I use both words here all the time. It's not me stuttering. Population grew in Egypt over hundreds of years. Secular history tells us these Hebrew, contributed much to the Egyptian society and technology. They also worshipped as the Egyptians did, putting their Canaan gods on the back burner while following the deities of Egypt. They also intermarried with the Egyptian nobility. This has been going on all over the world. These people want to be the aristocrats, and apparently they're part of this bloodline. Some people say they even shapeshift as reptilians, and apparently it has everything to do with the UFO aliens and grays, which we shall soon discover in some of these other books I'm going to continue reading and sharing. Mithras, channeling, Zachariah Stitchins, Enki, Nibiru, pole shift. More channeled material, the raw material. You can go online, it's free. Look up the raw material. Read some of that channeled material. But again, I keep saying, don't believe what you read, but read it and put it all into context. A lot of this stuff is deception. They want you to believe something. The Hebrews living in Egypt. As the Hebrews population grew in Egypt over hundreds of years, secular history tells us these Hebrew contributed much to Egyptian society and technology. They also worshipped as the Egyptians did, putting their Canaan gods in the back burner. They also intermarried with Egyptian nobility. In doing all this, the Hebrew people gradually took key positions of power, and this is true today. I've been going over this stuff in my videos. And wealth in ancient Egypt. They took over the USA money supply in 1913. It was in ca. 1655 BC 36, 55 years ago, when they actually took over Egypt by evading their brothers and evading Hisco armies of the East. A warring Hiscos nation. The Hiscos people were a force to be reckoned with in ancient times. So I would say today the Hebrews, the ones behind the Zionist, globalism, New World Order, New Age, not all Jewish people, are to be reckoned with today. The banksters, the Rothschilds, all these secret societies. And they're coming up with some super dangerous technologies. They're installing these pieces of equipment every day and testing them. They say they're even using these weapons to cause all the fires in California. These directed energy weapons brought down the Twin Towers, and they're causing earthquakes, controlling the weather, HARP systems. Where are we winding up here when this is all over, when they're ready to pull the trigger on us? All I can do is read the books and share what I see. There is a comment section below. What do you think? Got anything to add? Contribute some more information to support this? You got some information that says that this is not true? Or are you just mind controlled and you believe what you were told to believe? So you're going to disagree with all these books I've been going over. What are we going to do? I want to get to the truth. They were the first people of the Middle East to use the horse as a battle tool for war. Before the Hiscos, the horse was commonly used for agriculture and traveling purposes. I remember when I worked at a major aerospace company for 10 years, they had a lot of those microwave antennas out there in the field where I worked, near the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And there were big signs that said, warning, microwave energies are dangerous. So somebody must have read that and said, hey, this can be a weapon. So anything that's dangerous, apparently a truck ran into a bunch of people in New York City today. So I think these people trying to bring us more terror are continuing along with their program every day. We can expect more of this. With the help of the Hebrew brothers, remember I said there were several group of these nomadic peoples in Canaan, over in the Iraq area, Lebanon area to the north, and Israel, Jerusalem. So apparently they got together in cahoots and invaded Egypt. So they got together with their brothers who were already living in Egypt. So these Hebrew nomads from Saudi Arabia and land of Canaan, Russia, Ukraine, all that area, who had conquered the Sumerians, got together with their brothers who were already in Egypt because of the famine, and worked in cahoots to take over the Egyptian nation. Apparently they've been doing this for quite a while. Took over Germany, wanted all the Germans to be killed. I made a video, series 124, Germany Must Perish, and so many other videos, series 150, The Cause of World Unrest. So many in my series discusses this very topic. Bloody Zion, what video was that? I got to look at all the numbers. You can go on my website, rickmiracle.com. Top left-hand side should be a link to a list of my video series. So you can cut and paste and print it out and watch the videos you want to try to put this story together for yourself. This is 158 and over 400 videos, more than 500 hours. And 4 years worth of work of making videos and 13 years of reading books trying to figure out WTH. What the heck is going on? Maybe this is a clue here. Get the book, Howard West. Blood prince of the gods. What's it got to do with planet Nibiru, pole shifting, World War III, all this other craziness with all these satanic rituals and symbols everywhere? So with the help of the Habaru Hebrew brothers who were already living in Egypt, the Hyksos nation conquered Egypt. At this time, King Saltalus became the first pharaoh of the sacred bloodline to rule Egypt. So this sacred bloodline of these Sumerians mixed with all the nomadic people, apparently some kind of creation of the Anunnaki aliens, maybe, maybe not, a sacred bloodline, part reptilian, took over Egypt for the first time. The Anunnaki bloodline now had a second mighty throne. So they already had Babylon, Egypt, Babylon, Iraq. Now they have Egypt. Oh my gosh. So they got Babylon and mighty Egypt, but the Hyksos and Habaru Hebrew reign in Egypt wouldn't last long. Only 108 years to be exact. During his reign, Pharaoh Salatus made the city of Arvas in Egypt his capital city. His Hyksos Hebraic reign would be followed by 5 other Hyksos Hebrew kings. So they ruled Egypt for 108 years. Pharaoh Salatus, Pharaoh Beon, Pharaoh Apophis, Pharaoh Apophis, Pharaoh Johannes, and Pharaoh Asis. Well, my 2 hours are up, so I'll have to continue the story on this book, Howard West. I'm not trying to do an audiobook. I've read the entire book. It does seem to say that these beings from space, according to Howard West, Anunnaki from a planet Nibiru, mixed with Neanderthal man to create some slaves, and later on humans, as we know ourselves today, have evolved. And apparently, could it be true? It seems like it is, that somebody has been messing with religion, trying to get us to believe one thing, and now they want us to believe something else, and they're willing to kill many of us to do it. Look at these pictures here of something called, a being called Dagon. These priests and religious people wearing fish outfits, lions, wine, symbols. Something new fishy in the Western religion. Looks like there's that Marduk character in Babylon on the left there. And I've made a lot of books. The Serious Mystery. I'm re-releasing some of my videos because there were no comments, or I want to try to get some information back into the system. Because after I released a video a year ago, it seems like YouTube puts it someplace where nobody can see them. So what is it with these Egyptian or hieroglyphics and things etched in stone? This New Age culture, this propaganda. What's going on? Who's behind it? Why are they trying to rebuild King Solomon's temple in Jerusalem? Why did they do 9/11? Why are they destroying our world as we know it today? Who are these people? It's all about the Middle East. They're trying to conquer it again. Beings with wings and faces like humans. Were there really Anunnaki people here? Did they mix with their DNA? The biblical story, why God created the flood to destroy humanity, is because there were some beings, Anunnaki, whatever, Atlanteans, who had been messing around with DNA and genetic engineering and created all kinds of insane beasts. You can go on Yahoo image site and find these people. Just look up Dogon or Marduk or Mithras or even Ra or Seth, Zionism, Kabbalah, communism, Freemasons, witchcraft. You're going to see a lot of similarity in the symbols. So what are they telling us? It really is an interesting investigation. But you got to kind of wrap your head around some things to be able to try to understand it. See these little circles that look like flowers on this picture? Even in where I live, downtown, they have those symbols all over the older buildings. Even gargoyles on the top of some of our buildings. This is Marduk. Look up Marduk, M-A-R-D-U-K, under Yahoo image site. The commemorative monument. This object has some of the characteristics of a boundary stone. It was set up, however, in honor of a private individual, an official in the Marduk temple, by his son. The figure represents father, son together. Their shaven heads show they are both priests. About 900 to 800 BC, 2900, almost 3,000 years ago, from the temple, Marduk Temple, Babylon. Weren't we just reading about Babylon? And mixing that with the conversation of Anunnaki and channeled material? Did some beings come from space? Is that why they depict these things with wings? Look at the wings at the top of this one. The circle with the wings. You can go look up Marduk, Yahoo image site. Even crop circles. Are we connecting the dots yet? Why are these monuments in Egypt and other places around the world? Why do they want to rebuild King Solomon's temple? Who were these Hebrews? Were they Hyksos? Did they mix with the sacred bloodline of the Anunnaki reptilian beings? Is there something going on we don't know? According to the Dogon, a race of half fish and half human beings descended from the sky on West Africa and taught the Dogons many things, including sharing information of their homeworld. So what was it? Was Earth invaded by Dogons, a race of half fish and half human beings defending from the sky from the star system Sirius? Or was it beings from Nibiru called Anunnaki? Or were there multiple invasions? Palladians, Orions. What? I found this on the Dogon. You can see the word there. Yahoo image site, this picture, as well as many of these other pictures you just saw. So thank you for watching my video. If you like what I am doing, the research and the videos, you want to contribute to the cause, there is a donate button in the comment section. Click the URL, internet site, my PayPal thing. If I could get some money together, I would like to try to expand what I'm doing. Maybe go out there and do a lecture at one of the different kinds of events, or try to devote more time to do a regular live show. Put together a book. I'm working on that. That's why I'm republishing some videos, so I can get some intelligent, respectful comments, whether you agree or disagree. I think everybody needs to get involved and be part of the conversation. This is not a competition. I think the children, our children, their children, will wonder why we did or didn't do something when we saw all the signs of what's going on. You can go outside and see them dumping chemicals in your sky. It can't be good for us. And even in the chemicals, you can see these ripples. And you know it's electromagnetic energy. It can't be good for us. Plenty of information on the internet, in books, websites, common sense. Thank you for watching my video. Rick Miracle reporting.